Hey guys, I'm Marcus Klinger. Welcome to Klinger Vocal Studio. Today, let's have a grown-up conversation. When I was little, I would leave my singing classes feeling lost. They would use emotional words with me, suck in all the joy of the universe and then let it go in your performance. But when I got home, I couldn't really recreate it, and that would get frustrating. Why? The first reason is focus. National Geographic has a wonderful program called Brain Games, and there's an episode that talks about focus. It has the magician, David Copperfield, dropping coins and saying the word magic over and over in his conversation, and you had to count how many times he said the word magic and how many times he would drop the coins. After about 10 seconds, your brain exploded because they had a point. For human beings, our focus is like a cup of sugar that gets used up, and while we think it's a giant salad bowl, it's not. It's pretty small. And I realized that those beginning lessons, I was having so many things thrown at me that it was overflowing that cup of sugar. Or, if I was just given the instruction, sing from your toes, nothing was actually filling it at all. I didn't know what I was thinking about when I was singing. So, it started me thinking about those video games I used to play, the open world kind where you would just start in the middle of a field in a kingdom and you could wander into caves where there were enemies far too advanced for you. Or, there was the more strategy kind, the kind where you'd find yourself locked in a room. In the corner was a door. You'd knock on the door and somebody would say, "What's the password?" Now you know what you have to do. Look around the room for the little objects, the little clues on what that password might be. Then you had the skills to move on to the next room. And you probably had an item or two that were going to help you in that next room. And it was fun, because you knew where you needed to put your focus. You knew what the issue was. Then it was easy and fun. So that's how I realized I had to start teaching singing. I had to put you in a simple room with a few simple issues, a few simple instructions. And once those were conquered, you'd have some technique to move on to the next room and try something a little bit more tricky. So, how do we do that? How do I make sure that I don't overflow your cup of sugar? How do I avoid teaching music too emotionally so that you don't know what to do when you get home? How do I give your sugar somewhere to go? Let's start here. If you taste a cake and somebody says, "How is it?" it's probably good that you know what the ingredients are, so you can say there's too much sugar, there's too little salt. So, singing, what are the ingredients? Here they are. These are the 4 steps of singing. Number 1, respiration. We take a breath. Number 2, phonation. The chords simply touch. Number 3, resonation. What happens as the sound pours over the teeth and the tongue and the resonators. And step 4, articulators. Articulation. How your lips and your teeth cut the sound into English or whatever language you're singing in. And that's it. Feel free to comment, feel free to fight me on this, but those are the 4 steps of singing. And once we know that, isn't that cool? That I can say, hey, maybe you're using your phonators for too much power. Why don't you try using your respirators instead? And already, we have somewhere for that sugar to go. Now, what's the next step of this? What do I teach at my first singing class for every student? What's taken me years to figure out? This triangle. I haven't found it in the books. I haven't found it in a particular YouTube video. I've put it together from a long career of theater and teaching student after student, realizing what every single one of them has in common. Technique. They need this. These 3 things. And they're pretty simple. Number 1, the base of the triangle. Breath. Where we put it, how we use it. Number 2, trowel air. The hidden gem in all of singing. Taking "when the rain" with a hammer and turning it into "when the rain" with a trowel. And then third, finally, natural volume, or what we've been talking about in the first 3 episodes of the podcast. Why it's scary, but why it's so important. That's it. That's the technique. That triangle. In balance. And the cool thing about it, it's a mnemonic. You can't focus on one leg of that triangle without the other 2 improving, and without needing the other 2 to even accomplish it in the first place. So where put your cup of sugar? Let's start by putting it on air. Where you put it, how you use it. When you take a breath, these are the things you're going to do. And then watch how that improves the other 2 legs. And then we'll talk about trowel. How do we use our articulators? How do we use our air flow to connect all of those words on one strong flow of air? Then it becomes a conversation about that. And then when you go to sing and the spotlight comes on and the orchestra starts, you just have to picture that triangle. And it's all there for you. Now, Marcus, why are you giving away the farm? Why are you telling everybody about this triangle? It's taken you years to put together. It's this. Just because I have a map to Disneyland doesn't mean that everybody knows how to get there with it. That's the challenge. This is just the vocabulary, but it's the putting it into practice that's the art. And with everybody, it's different. Yes, that triangle idea is how I teach, but I apply it to everybody a little bit differently because everybody brings strengths to the table. Everybody brings a leg or two of that triangle that are amazing and one that needs a little bit of work. So, try it on for size. See what you think. Make some comments. Fight me. I've got a prove me wrong attitude when it comes to all this. I spent far too much money on far too many other singing teachers that weren't teaching these things, that were just teaching me to sing from my feet, which I don't like to do. So, thank you for being here. Thank you for this episode of the podcast, for your kind attention. Please join me in a future episode when my godson, Nando Molinar, will be my guest. We're going to talk about the mechanics of singing versus the emotion of singing, and I'm going to kind of walk him through a beginning voice class, and we'll see what happens. One take, if we can pull it off. Yeah. So remember, your deepest power is your deepest relaxation. Thank you, Joe. Thank you for joining me on this week's Klinger Vocal Studio. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.